The distress beacon arrived at 0300 hours, dragging Admiral Frank Morgan from restless sleep into a nightmare that would reshape humanity's place among the stars. Morgan's hands moved across the holographic display aboard the United Nations Space Command orbital station, replaying the signal pattern for the seventh time. The rhythmic pulses originated from somewhere deep in the Kuiper belt, artificial in origin, repeating with mathematical precision. Beside him, tactical analyst Samantha Rivers studied the energy signature from the initial explosion, her eyes narrowing at the readings that suggested a massive reactor failure. The kind that happened to ships, not asteroids. Within 6 hours, the Security Council convened in emergency session. Morgan stood before the assembled representatives, projecting images of the debris field spreading across the outer system. The vote carried unanimous approval. Earth would respond to this first contact not with weapons, but with mercy. They would send their finest medical vessels, their best scientists, their most advanced rescue equipment. 6 ships would make the journey. The flagship USS Normandy under Morgan's direct command. 2 mobile hospitals equipped with adaptive surgical bays. 1 research vessel configured for xenobiology, and 2 escort frigates carrying minimal defensive armaments. Dr. Olivia Wright accepted her assignment as chief xenobiologist with hands that trembled despite years of preparation. She had spent 2 decades studying theoretical alien biology, constructing models of possible physiologies, dreaming of the day when theory became reality. Now that moment approached faster than she had imagined possible. She moved through the Normandy's converted science bay, supervising the installation of isolation chambers and decontamination systems, preparing for organisms that existed only in her imagination until now. Captain Greg Patterson commanded the USS Mercy, the lead medical vessel. He stood in his ship's main surgical theater, watching his teams prepare adaptive equipment that could theoretically treat injuries in carbon-based life forms regardless of their specific biochemistry. His background included combat medicine during the Third World War, humanitarian missions to disaster zones, and training in every emergency protocol Earth's military had developed. None of it seemed adequate for what lay ahead. The fleet departed Earth orbit 13 days before the encounter that would define them. During the 2-week journey to the Kuiper belt, Wright coordinated with Patterson's medical teams, sharing her research on possible alien physiologies and the universal principles that might govern biological functions across evolutionary paths. They discussed scenarios endlessly, preparing for contingencies that ranged from the mundane to the bizarre. Patterson listened intently, absorbing information that might save lives when they reached the damaged vessel. Morgan spent the journey reviewing every first contact protocol Earth strategists had developed, knowing full well that actual events would likely render all preparation meaningless. He walked the Normandy's corridors at odd hours, unable to sleep, feeling the weight of representing humanity in this pivotal moment. His second in command, Commander James Hawthorne, found him staring out an observation port on the 8th day, watching stars that had seemed distant and cold suddenly feel crowded with possibility. On day 13, long-range sensors detected the debris field. The damaged alien vessel drifted at its center, listing but structurally intact. Life signs registered faint but present across multiple sections of the craft. Morgan ordered the fleet into approach formation, with the Mercy taking point position. Patterson's vessel moved ahead slowly, every scanning array active, searching for hazards in the wreckage. Wright stood on the Mercy's observation deck as they closed the final distance, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the viewport, she glimpsed the alien craft for the first time. Its architecture defied human aesthetic sensibilities, all flowing curves and organic shapes that suggested a fundamentally different approach to engineering. She began recording observations, documenting humanity's first visual contact with technology born under alien stars. Rivers aboard the Normandy detected the new contacts first. 3 massive energy signatures materialized without warning, emerging from positions that suggested advanced stealth capabilities. Her training kept her voice steady as she reported the contacts to Morgan, though her hands clenched into fists beneath her console. The Admiral stared at the tactical display, watching three predatory shapes accelerate toward his fleet from behind the debris field. The attack began without communication, without warning, without mercy. Energy weapons tore through space, targeting the Normandy's engine compartments with precision that spoke of detailed intelligence about human ship design. Morgan's first escort vessel exploded in a sphere of superheated plasma before they could activate defensive systems. The Normandy shuddered under direct hits, shields collapsing, hull integrity failing across multiple decks. Morgan gripped his command chair, watching his carefully planned rescue mission dissolve into chaos and fire. Aboard the Mercy, Patterson made the only decision possible. His ship carried no weapons, only medical equipment and the hope of peaceful contact. He ordered emergency departure, accelerating away from the ambush site at maximum thrust. Through his viewports, he witnessed the second escort vessel break apart under concentrated fire. The research ship attempted to flee alongside the Mercy, its civilian crew never trained for combat. Wright stood frozen at a station, watching humanity's dream of peaceful first contact burn in the Kuiper Belt's darkness. The attackers moved with ruthless efficiency, their angular vessels built for destruction rather than exploration. They targeted communications arrays, weapons systems, engines, disabling rather than destroying initially, as if conducting a clinical dissection of Earth's technological capabilities. Morgan's final transmission reached the Mercy before the Normandy's communications went dark. Patterson heard his colleague's voice, crackling through static and interference, speaking words that would echo through human history. The Admiral reported facts without emotion: unprovoked attack, complete tactical surprise, hostile intent. His last words declared this an act of war, urging Earth to prepare for what was coming. The Normandy died slowly, its hull breached in a dozen places, its crew fighting fires and decompression until the attackers delivered the final blows. Patterson watched the flagship's signature vanish from his sensors, marking the end of Frank Morgan's life and the death of humanity's naive hope for peaceful coexistence among the stars. The Mercy raced toward Earth with the research vessel trailing behind, their holds empty of rescued aliens, their mission transformed into something darker. The journey home took 8 days that stretched like years. Wright compiled footage of the attack, documenting every detail with clinical precision despite hands that shook. Rivers, who had transferred to the Mercy minutes before the ambush, reviewed tactical data obsessively, searching for patterns in the attacker's methodology. Patterson stood watch on his bridge for hours at a stretch, sleeping in brief intervals, haunted by the memory of ships dying behind him. He had commanded medical vessels for 15 years, saving lives across Earth's conflicts and disasters. Retreating while colleagues burned felt like betrayal, though logic insisted he had made the only survivable choice. Upon reaching Earth orbit, the survivors prepared their report for United Nations Space Command. Patterson straightened his uniform, checking his appearance in a mirror for the first time in days. He looked older, worn by accumulated stress and insufficient sleep. Beside him, Wright clutched the data core containing their evidence, while Rivers carried tactical analysis that detailed the attackers' precise knowledge of human ship vulnerabilities. General Peter Howard commanded Earth's military forces from a war room buried beneath the Rocky Mountains. He listened to Patterson's verbal report in silence, his weathered face betraying no emotion. When the footage began, showing the ambush and destruction in brutal clarity, Howard's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Morgan's final words played across speakers throughout the facility, the Admiral's voice steady even as his ship died around him. Howard stood from his chair when the footage ended, walking to reinforced windows overlooking the command center's lower levels. Below, hundreds of analysts and strategists worked at stations, monitoring Earth's defenses and tracking movements throughout the solar system. Patterson joined him at the window, the two career military officers sharing a moment of silence for their dead. Intelligence officer Kyle Martinez entered with his tablet, his usual composure shaken. His research division had been monitoring unusual contacts throughout the system for months, dismissing them as sensor ghosts or natural phenomena. Now those contacts formed a pattern. The attackers, designated Valkyrie based on linguistic analysis of their brief transmission, had been scouting Earth's defenses for at least 6 months, possibly longer. The briefing room filled with Security Council members joining via emergency link. Faces appeared on screens around the room, world leaders drawn from sleep or interrupted from critical meetings. Howard presented the evidence methodically, walking them through the attack sequence, the casualty count, and the implications. 342 personnel dead on a humanitarian mission. A rescue fleet destroyed while attempting to render aid. Wright spoke when Howard requested her analysis, explaining the attackers' apparent familiarity with human technology and the deliberate nature of their assault. This was not a misunderstanding or a tragic first contact gone wrong. The Valkyrie had studied humanity, evaluated their defenses, and executed an ambush designed to demonstrate overwhelming superiority while testing human response capabilities. The council members debated for hours while Patterson paced corridors outside the briefing room, unable to remain still. Wright found him staring at a memorial wall listing casualties from previous conflicts, studying names carved into black stone. She stood beside him without speaking, sharing the weight of knowing their actions had altered humanity's trajectory in ways they could barely comprehend. Martinez interrupted with new intelligence that transformed debate into action. Multiple contacts were entering the solar system, following the same trajectory as the rescue fleet. Preliminary analysis suggested at least 20 vessels, significantly larger than those that had destroyed Morgan's ships. Earth faced a full invasion force approaching with deliberate speed. The Security Council vote carried within minutes. Sentinel Protocol achieved activation. The defensive plan developed after the Third World War, never tested outside simulations, now became operational reality. Across Earth, military bases dormant for decades surged to life. Factories began retooling production lines, converting civilian manufacturing capacity to military hardware. Reserves received mobilization orders. Humanity prepared for war against an enemy they barely understood. Admiral Patterson received summons to a classified facility beneath the Rockies, deeper than the command center where he had delivered his report. The elevator descended for what felt like minutes, dropping into bedrock where the world's deepest secrets waited. The doors opened onto a hangar carved from living stone, revealing warships that officially did not exist. Dr. Alan Blake directed the Advanced Weapons Division, a soft-spoken engineer who had spent 3 decades preparing for this moment. He walked Patterson through rows of stealth-configured warships, their hulls coated with light-absorbing materials, their engines modified to minimize thermal signatures. The Shadow Fleet, built in absolute secrecy following the Proxima Centauri incident 30 years prior. Patterson studied the nearest vessel, noting advanced weapon systems and shield generators that exceeded anything in Earth's official navy. Blake explained the development program, authorized by Security Council members who recognized that humanity's expansion into space required insurance against hostile contact. 50 combat-ready vessels waited in this hidden facility, with 30 more nearing completion in similar facilities scattered across Earth's surface and orbital infrastructure. Wright, meanwhile, led scientific teams analyzing sensor data from the Valkyrie vessels. Every detail mattered, every measurement potentially revealing weaknesses that could shift the coming conflict. She discovered anomalies in their shield frequencies, patterns suggesting vulnerabilities that properly tuned weapons might exploit. Her findings reached engineering teams working around the clock to modify Shadow Fleet armaments. Rivers trained boarding teams in another secure facility, preparing for close combat against aliens whose capabilities remained largely unknown. She pushed recruits through scenarios ranging from zero-gravity assault to fighting in unknown atmospheres, demanding excellence from soldiers who understood they might face deployment within days. Earth's public received carefully calibrated announcements explaining the situation without revealing the full scope of preparations. An alien threat had been detected. Defensive measures were being implemented. Citizens should remain calm but vigilant. The announcements omitted mention of the Shadow Fleet, the scale of mobilization, or the fact that Earth's military leaders were planning not just defense, but a preemptive strike. Howard assembled fleet commanders in the war room, 4 days after the Valkyrie invasion force entered the system. Patterson attended wearing insignia he had received hours earlier, promoting him to admiral and granting command of the Shadow Fleet. Morgan's death left vacancies throughout Earth's command structure, requiring rapid advancement for officers with relevant experience. Howard's briefing was direct and unambiguous. The Valkyrie expected surrender, anticipated humanity's capitulation to superior force. Instead, they would encounter resistance that transformed their invasion into a nightmare. Earth would not simply defend itself. Humanity would carry the fight to their enemies, demonstrating that attacking a rescue mission carried consequences measured in blood and fire. Patterson stood before his new command aboard the USS Vengeance, the Shadow Fleet's flagship. The ship stretched over a kilometer in length, its weapons arrays powerful enough to crack moons, its stealth systems making it nearly invisible to conventional sensors. His bridge crew consisted of hand-picked specialists, many of whom had lost friends or family on Morgan's rescue fleet. They worked with quiet intensity, preparing systems for combat that would come soon. Rivers served as Patterson's tactical officer, her analytical skills essential for coordinating the Shadow Fleet's unconventional warfare tactics. She stood at her console running combat simulations, refining attack patterns, preparing contingencies for scenarios that ranged from straightforward engagement to desperate last stands. Wright brought Patterson her completed analysis of Valkyrie's shield frequencies. Sitting in his ready room aboard the Vengeance, he studied her findings while she explained the rotating pattern their defensive systems employed. If Earth's weapons could match those frequencies, shifting in real time to counter the rotation, they might penetrate shields that otherwise rendered human weapons ineffective. Engineer Lisa Daniels led the modification effort, working with insufficient time and demanding perfection anyway. She pushed her teams beyond exhaustion, installing frequency modulators on weapons systems across the Shadow Fleet. The modifications consumed enormous power, requiring diversion from non-essential systems, but simulations suggested they would function as designed. Patterson gathered his senior officers 3 hours before departure, sharing Howard's final briefing and his own expectations. They represented humanity in this fight, carried the responsibility of proving Earth would not submit to conquest. Morgan had reached out with mercy and died for his compassion. Now humanity would respond with calculated violence, teaching the Valkyrie that kindness should never be mistaken for weakness. The Shadow Fleet departed Earth orbit in darkness, 50 warships sliding silently away from humanity's cradle. They accelerated toward Mars orbit, positioning themselves to intercept the approaching fleet before it could threaten Earth directly. Patterson stood on the Vengeance's bridge, watching stars drift past, feeling the weight of command settle across his shoulders like iron. Wright joined him during the approach to Mars, asking about the Prometheus protocol mentioned in classified briefings. Patterson confirmed its existence without elaborating, explaining only that it represented humanity's ultimate deterrent, a weapon so terrible that its use would fundamentally alter the moral calculus of the war. He hoped they would never need to discover whether it could actually function as designed. The Shadow Fleet took position behind Deimos, Mars's smaller moon, using its mass to mask their presence from the approaching Valkyrie. Patterson watched his tactical display update as the enemy fleet moved into visual range. 23 vessels arranged in standard formation, centered on a massive command ship that dwarfed its escorts. The aliens moved with confidence born from previous victories, approaching Mars as if they owned the solar system already. Rivers reported Valkyrie scanning operations targeting Mars itself, searching for resources to extract, evaluating the planet's usefulness for their purposes. Patterson felt anger kindle in his chest, watching aliens casually assess humanity's neighboring world as potential property. He tamped down the emotion, channeling it into cold focus. The Shadow Fleet emerged from concealment, accelerating hard, weapons already charging. Patterson gave the order to fire, targeting the formation's rear elements first, exploiting the Valkyrie's arrogant assumption of superiority. The frequency-modulated weapons performed exactly as Daniels had promised, punching through alien shields as if they were not there. 3 Valkyrie vessels exploded before they could respond, torn apart by weapons they could not block. The alien formation scattered, caught completely by surprise, their return fire disorganized and ineffective. Patterson pressed the advantage, ordering sustained bombardment while the enemy struggled to regroup. Wright watched the battle from her station, feeling satisfaction war with horror. She had devoted her career to peaceful contact with alien life, dreaming of cultural exchange and shared knowledge. Instead, she found herself cataloging the destruction of ships crewed by beings she would never understand, studying their dying vessels for tactical intelligence. The Valkyrie command ship broke away after losing 6 escorts, accelerating toward the outer system in retreat. Patterson let them go, recognizing that allowing survivors ensured news of humanity's capabilities would spread. Better to have enemies who knew humans could fight than to face waves of attackers operating from ignorance. The bridge erupted in celebration when the last Valkyrie vessel fled beyond effective weapon range. Humanity's first major engagement had ended in decisive victory. 0 casualties on Earth's side. 6 enemy ships destroyed. Patterson raised his hand for silence, reminding his crew that this represented only the opening move in a longer conflict. The Shadow War began that day, evolving into 3 weeks of running battles throughout the solar system. Patterson refused to let the Valkyrie establish defensive positions, constantly harassing their attempts to regroup or resupply. Hit-and-run tactics frustrated the aliens, who seemed incapable of adapting to unconventional warfare. Martinez decoded Valkyrie communications intercepts, revealing their pattern of attacking younger civilizations. The intelligence painted a disturbing picture of systematic conquest spanning decades, with Earth just the latest target in a long campaign of subjugation. Other species had fallen to the same tactics: scouting, evaluation, demands for submission, followed by overwhelming force against any resistance. Rivers led a boarding operation against a Valkyrie supply vessel near Titan, capturing the ship largely intact and securing valuable intelligence. Her team fought through strange corridors lit by bioluminescent panels, encountering minimal resistance from a skeleton crew. What they found in the engineering section made Rivers's blood run cold. Preservation tanks lined one bulkhead, containing biological specimens from multiple species. Organs, limbs, tissue samples collected from conquered worlds. Wright analyzed the materials after Rivers returned to the Vengeance, confirming they included what appeared to be human samples. The Valkyrie had been planning Earth's conquest for longer than anyone suspected. The intelligence hall included star charts marking Valkyrie outposts, supply routes, and most critically, the locations of other species fighting against alien oppression. Patterson saw opportunity in that last revelation. Earth needed allies, required partners who understood the Valkyrie threat and possessed their own capabilities to contribute. Contact with the archery came first, establishing communication with tall beings whose iridescent skin shifted through color spectrums as their emotional states changed. The archery had resisted Valkyrie expansion for years, fighting a defensive war against superior numbers. Earth's sudden intervention and tactical successes provided hope they had not felt in months. The Nelvians made contact next, a shorter species with 4 arms and enormous eyes adapted for dim light. Their vessels possessed incredible speed, able to outrun Valkyrie pursuit craft with ease. Combined with Earth's stealth technology and archery sensors, the Alliance could coordinate attacks the Valkyrie had no framework to counter. 4 months into the war, Patterson stood in the Vengeance's conference room with representatives from both allied species. Kelnar commanded the archery fleet, his skin flickering through blues and greens as he discussed strategy. Torlak led the Nelvian forces, his translated words carrying musical undertones that human linguistics specialists struggled to parse. Wright entered with Daniels, both women exhausted from weeks of intensive research. Wright had discovered that Valkyrie physiology included vulnerability to specific radiation frequencies, allowing development of weapons that could incapacitate their troops non-lethally. Daniels had weaponized the discovery, modifying boarding teams' equipment to exploit the weakness. Martinez brought intelligence suggesting the Valkyrie were consolidating their scattered forces near the Sirius system. preparing for a massive counteroffensive. Nearly 40 ships gathering in one location, including their primary command vessel. Patterson recognized opportunity in the enemy's concentration. A decisive victory that could break Valkyrie aggression permanently. Rivers had been training mixed-species boarding teams, combining human, archery, and Nelvian specialists into integrated units. She reported their readiness to Patterson, emphasizing the mission's extreme danger, but also its potential payoff. Boarding the Valkyrie command ship during battle could allow planting disruption devices that would cripple the entire enemy fleet. The Allied fleet moved toward the Sirius system 2 days later, using a nebula for concealment during their approach. Patterson addressed his crews before engagement, reminding them what they fought for. The Valkyrie had attacked a rescue mission, threatened Earth's survival, and subjugated multiple civilizations. Today, free people throughout local space would demonstrate their refusal to accept tyranny. Rivers launched from the Vengeance in a stealth vessel, carrying her boarding team moments before the Allied fleet engaged. She watched the battle erupt across her sensors, energy beams and missiles creating deadly patterns through vacuum. The Allied forces moved with coordination born from months of joint operations, exploiting Valkyrie weaknesses systematically. Her team penetrated the command ship's hull without detection, cutting through armor with modified tools that operated silently. Inside, they moved through corridors designed for beings with different proportions, encountering Valkyrie soldiers who dropped instantly when struck by the specialized radiation weapons. Rivers planted disruption devices at 3 shield generator nodes throughout the massive vessel, working against time while the battle raged outside. Each device activated successfully, sending signals that Daniels would use to deploy her virus throughout the Valkyrie fleet's networked defensive systems. Patterson watched his tactical display as the battle developed, noting damage accumulating across Allied vessels. 3 Nelvian ships had been destroyed. Several human warships reported critical failures. The Valkyrie fought with desperate intensity, seemingly aware this engagement represented a turning point. Daniels deployed her virus when Rivers confirmed all disruptors were active. The program spread through Valkyrie communications networks in seconds, disrupting shield generators across their entire fleet simultaneously. Patterson watched enemy defensive screens flicker and die, leaving their vessels vulnerable for the first time. The Allied fleet intensified fire against suddenly exposed targets, targeting weapons and engines systematically. Valkyrie ships began breaking formation, some attempting retreat while others fought on without defensive capabilities. The command vessel tried escaping, accelerating away from the battle. A transmission came through as the Valkyrie commander attempted negotiation. Supreme Commander Vexakar threatened to detonate reactor cores, destroying everything in the system rather than accepting defeat. Patterson opened a channel, voice steady, as he delivered his response. He invoked the Prometheus protocol, describing a weapon designed to exploit Valkyrie neural vulnerabilities on a massive scale. The protocol was largely fiction, a psychological weapon built on Wright's biological discoveries and Patterson's willingness to bluff. He spoke with absolute confidence, betting that the Valkyrie commander would believe Earth possessed capabilities matching their worst fears. The silence stretched across communications channels while Vexakar considered options. Patterson held his breath, aware that calling his bluff would force desperate measures. Finally, the Valkyrie commander agreed to stand down weapons across the entire fleet. Allied crews erupted in celebration as Valkyrie vessels powered down offensive systems and submitted to boarding operations. The species that had terrorized local space for decades had surrendered to a coalition they had underestimated. The months following brought rapid expansion of the alliance. 3 more species joined, each carrying stories of resistance against Valkyrie oppression. Together, they formed foundations for what would eventually become the Galactic Council, establishing frameworks for cooperation and mutual defense. Earth emerged as a leader within the alliance, recognized for tactical innovation and willingness to resist overwhelming odds. Patterson attended diplomatic conferences alongside combat operations, helping shape policies that would govern interactions between species. Wright led scientific exchanges, finally achieving the peaceful contact she had always dreamed of, though the path there had run through fire and blood. Rivers continued training special operations forces, now drawn from half a dozen species. Daniels established engineering programs, sharing technology and techniques across the Alliance. Martinez built intelligence networks, connecting worlds separated by light years. Memorials rose on Earth commemorating Morgan's rescue fleet, honoring the 342 who died attempting mercy. Their names were carved in stone at United Nations headquarters, a permanent reminder that humanity's first contact had been an act of compassion met with violence. The sacrifice had ultimately saved not just Earth, but multiple civilizations throughout local space. Patterson returned to Earth 6 months after the decisive battle at Sirius. He stood before the memorial wall, reading names he had known, remembering faces that would never age beyond that terrible day in the Kuiper Belt. Howard joined him there, the general looking older than Patterson remembered, worn by months of coordinating humanity's transformation into a major interstellar power. They discussed the future in quiet tones, considering what came next. The Valkyrie had been defeated but not destroyed, their remaining forces scattered across distant systems. Other threats surely existed beyond explored space. Humanity and its allies needed to remain vigilant, continue developing their capabilities, prepare for challenges they could not yet imagine. Wright found Patterson at the memorial as evening fell over the capital. She carried reports on cultural exchange programs beginning to flourish between allied species, scientists sharing knowledge that advanced everyone's understanding. The violence that brought them together was giving way to cooperation that might reshape galactic civilization. They walked together through the memorial gardens, discussing how the war had changed them both. Wright had abandoned naive hopes for purely peaceful contact, accepting that the universe contained threats requiring forceful response. Patterson had learned that mercy and strength could coexist, that humanity's capacity for compassion represented power rather than weakness. The sun set behind Earth's skyline as they reached the memorial's central plaza. There, illuminated by eternal flames, stood a statue depicting Morgan in the moment before his death, hand raised in final salutation. The inscription beneath read simply, "They came in peace." Patterson stood before the statue as darkness gathered, remembering his mentor and friend. Morgan had believed in humanity's better nature, had insisted they respond to the distress signal with aid rather than suspicion. His faith had cost him everything, yet Patterson could not say it was misplaced. The attack on Earth's rescue fleet had sparked resistance that freed dozens of worlds, establishing principles of cooperation and mutual defense that would shape galactic politics for generations. Morgan's death had not been meaningless. His sacrifice had revealed both humanity's capacity for mercy and its unwillingness to accept subjugation, two qualities that would define Earth's role among the stars. Patterson saluted the statue as he had saluted Morgan countless times during their service together. The gesture felt inadequate, too small to encompass everything Morgan's decision had set in motion. Yet it was what soldiers did, how they honored fallen comrades who shaped the world through their choices. He turned from the memorial as full night descended, walking toward the shuttle that would carry him back to orbit and the Vengeance. The Shadow Fleet remained on alert, ready to respond to threats that might emerge. Patterson would command them as long as necessary, ensuring that humanity kept faith with Morgan's vision of a species strong enough to offer mercy and powerful enough to defend it. Above Earth's atmosphere, allied ships from 6 species maintained watch over humanity's cradle world. The rescue fleet's destruction had changed everything, transforming isolated civilizations into partners united against tyranny. From tragedy had come cooperation, from violence had emerged hope, and from humanity's refusal to submit had grown something larger than any single species. The stars that had seemed so distant and cold now teemed with allies and possibilities. Earth's position among them had been purchased with blood, but maintained through principles that Morgan would have recognized. Humanity had proven itself worthy of the galactic stage not through conquest, but through its response to being attacked while attempting rescue. Patterson reached the shuttle pad and paused for one final look at the memorial, seeing other visitors arriving to pay respects as he departed. Morgan's name would endure there, carved in stone, remembered by generations who would know the galaxy only as he had helped shape it. The admiral who died attempting mercy had ultimately saved more lives than any weapon could destroy. The shuttle lifted into the night sky, carrying Patterson toward his ship and whatever challenges waited beyond Earth's protective embrace. Below, the memorial's eternal flames burned steady, marking the moment when humanity learned that the capacity for both compassion and righteous violence defined true strength among the stars.